What if you didn't have to pay stamp duty all at once? In this episode, I'm joined by David Powell, CEO of Andrews Property Group, to talk about his bold plan to shake up the system and why it could be the key to unlocking the UK housing market. Hope you enjoy. David, thank you for coming on the podcast today. So, you've had a really long, successful career in the property world. Give us a bit of an overview about your journey and how you came to lead Andrews as a business.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I've only ever been in property, Chris. I started as a 19-year-old negotiator, and my journey is very much followed as many would. So working through the ranks into management, regional management. I set up my own business in 2009, and then went on to sell that in 2012 and ran a regional firm in the southwest. And I first got involved in Andrews 2021, just as COVID was starting to disappear. And I've had various promotions since being in Andrews to effectively the role that I'm sitting in now as CEO of the group.
And how does it different with Andrews? Because obviously I know you're basically a charity effectively behind the scenes. So obviously socially, ethically, it's all a little bit different. Did you feel that when you kind of stepped through the Andrews front door?
Um, I wouldn't say I necessarily felt it when I first stepped in, although it's a culture that we've embraced and created and made sure it's center of the business today. So the business operates like any other property business. Yeah, we have a shareholder, we got to report to them. The business itself need to trade, need to look after customers. But that culture and the charity piece, yeah, absolutely sits in the business, ensuring that we're doing what we do in the right way and for the right reasons. And we hold on to that dearly.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing with Andrews. I've had Harry Truman on the podcast a little while ago. We talked about it in quite some detail, and I love the sort of charitable arm of the business. I think it's a really amazing thing you guys are doing. So really well done you, to say the least. So the big topic which we're going to talk about today is stamp duty in the UK. So I did a little bit of research on this because I would not say I'm an expert in stamp duty. I know the rules tend to change every 15 minutes, or it feels like every 15 minutes, and so historically, stamp duty in the 1990s was kind of like a 1% tax across the board. Then it got gone more like in the 2000s, and it obviously changed to the structure of up to 250 and all that sort of stuff. So, do you think that stamp duty has evolved to stay up to date with what the property market is up to today?
I don't think it's evolved for the better. I think it's become an incredible expense for many, and that's certainly impacting consumers. And I think one of the reasons we started this campaign really was from a business perspective, and you see all the pressures on customers in terms of trying to do everything they can to get to the end of a deadline. You see solicitors absolutely break themselves to get transactions through, removal firms, everyone that's involved. So I think as the government play with it and bring in short-term solutions, that they generally create more problems for many. I think the cost of stamp duty, you know, really is penalising economic growth, and I think if that's reviewed in the correct way, we can absolutely get a sustainable solution that seems to be fair and certainly a far better practice than we currently got.
Because I'm always a little bit baffled about this, because I would imagine if I was in government, I would want people moving house as much as possible. Because let's say hypothetically that I made less on tax, I'd want people moving as much as possible, because I know that every person who buys a house, they get a new kitchen, they get a new bathroom, they get new carpets, they get all these trades, and they get new furniture, and there's so much money they pump into the economy because they bought a new house and therefore they want to do it up and buy bits and pieces to it. Why are we pushing to a point where people are moving less and less often? Surely you'd be wanting to go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think the government have got a very difficult challenge. Yeah, we could have petitioned to remove stamp duty. I just don't think that would land. And there's absolutely a very good argument to remove stamp duty because the economic stimulus that you referred to there will be far greater than the 12 billion that's being created per annum out of stamp duty land tax now. Um, I think the government are probably driven by fear because if they take it away and that doesn't come in, they can't afford to lose the revenue in that sense. So it's how do you kind of get to a point where the government still have some comfort, they've got some revenue, because that economic stimulus will only happen in a positive market, right? So you end up with a property market that goes backwards, and these cycles generally repeat themselves. The government lose that economic stimulus and they lose that stamp duty element as well. And if they remove that stamp duty element, they don't get the economic stimulus. They're going to be taxing us in another way, and we're going to be paying it in a different format. So I dare say the government have got a difficult decision around this, but there's certainly a better way, I believe, that they can stimulate the market, bring that economic growth, with all the parts that attach themselves to it. Really by allowing people to spread that cost over a longer period. I think adding to that, right move that would be very supportive on this. They've, yeah, really talking about hiring the thresholds as well. And I think that point is absolutely fair. House prices have increased, but yet stamp duty mark still stayed the same. And that doesn't quite seem right.
And who do you think is getting hit hardest by this?
Um, for me, is actually the first time movers, not first time sellers, first time movers, people that have bought their first house and now selling it because they're generally sitting there in some places with not necessarily significant capital growth within their property. So if they're selling their property and, it's not uncommon for people to use the funds of their sale to aid the next purchase in terms of moving costs. And then that is detriment to the deposits they can put down, which may mean they have to pay slightly higher rates. So, I think for me, the first time movers are of challenge. And they're the ones you want to unlock to sell that property to a first time buyer to be able to move on to the next one and make those changes happen.
Yeah, it's quite a blocker to say, great, you've got equity in your property and, fantastic, you've saved up and you've got money in your account. Oh, yeah, but by the way, we need an extra 10 grand in cash, like now, to make this happen. I mean, that seems very unrealistic in most situations for people.
Yeah, completely. And we're not talking small sums. Now that, for anyone, Chris, if we take the easy number of £500,000 purchase price for a first time mover, it's £15,000 in stamp duty. Yeah, but that's a lot of equity out of their one unit. And I think adding to that, equally, and a lot of people forget, people will often attach that £15,000. They will take a £15,000 bigger mortgage over the next 25 years and pay that interest on 25 years rather than the shorter period, which again means the consumer loses out. So I'm sure we can do better.
I'm going to stir the pot slightly here, if that's okay. And surely, if you look at most people who are in parliament or in power, they are of a certain age, generally speaking, and have there'll be a certain financial situation that they're in that other people aren't in. So, for example, you would look at the government, for example, and people like George Osborne, for example, jump to mind because I can remember him buying 7 or 8 flats down in Southampton all in one go, which most people can't do. Do you think there's some sort of disconnect between reality and the government, between what the actual on the ground normal people, inverted commas, are struggling with and what the government actually either care about or think they're struggling with?
Yeah. I think a lot of people will run to a disconnect for the reasons that you've presented there, Chris. But I still think the government's responsibility here is to create some form of economic growth around them to support the whole country. So even if they separate what their personal situation may be, I think this will allow them to stimulate the growth that's required in other areas. And think I'd like to think they're all capable of separating the two.
You'd hope so. So talk me through the plan. Talk me through the petition. Talk me through sort of the nuts and bolts about what you're proposing.
Yeah, absolutely. The proposal here is very much for a buyer to be able to spread the cost of stamp duty over up to a 5-year period. It should be optional, so if they don't want to spread it, they'd still be able to pay up front. That's absolutely fine. Suits some people. But by spreading it over a 5-year period means, one, they're not attaching that cost to their mortgage, that they're being able to put down a bigger deposit. It means they'll be paying interest possibly on that part for 5 years, or it's government supported, so there's no interest. Therefore, they're not adding it to a 25-year term or however long that term may be. So it should in turn allow them to have a slightly bigger deposit, which will help their loan to value, hopefully give them a better rate. And again, hopefully give them the ability to buy the house that they need to buy rather than the one they might be forced to buy as well. So I think we've got an affordability crisis. I feel, Chris, mortgage rates have gone up over the last few years. They're still a fair bit higher. And I think if we can make this move, it should free up that marketplace and allow people to be able to make that move into what they probably need.
And how would that look like on the ground effectively? So people would have their mortgage repayments going out every month, for example, and obviously before they move in, they make their first payment, I presume. That's kind of their fifth of their payment to come through. then at the end of the year, do they get another payment, or can they do that? Does that get bolted into their mortgage and it get adding over the whole, the first 5 years that comes through? How does the kind of the nuts and bolts of that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, it's a good question, and I've had several questions from various people about how this will work. And I often tend to defend it. I'm there to provide the suggestion. It's for the government to sort the mechanics. But I think if, in terms of answering that question, if you look at the way Sybil's loans worked with businesses, the bank would collect the money on a quarterly basis and then pass that through to the government. So yeah, I don't see any reasons why the lender cannot collect a monthly sum. That gets passed on to the government, and then that payment will just reduce down on the statement. I think it'll be fair to protect the taxpayer here. You'd have a second charge on the property. Um, and therefore, if there was a default, the taxpayer is protected, so there's no risk at that part. And then obviously after the 5-year period, or once it's been paid down, then it gets cleared and everyone moves forwards.
Yeah, so I presume that if someone stopped paying, for example, they did that first payment that first year and thought, don't worry about that. I don't worry about the next 4 years, sort of thing. I guess when they sell their property, that is just taken back straight away. Thank you very much. Yeah, almost like a charge on the property, as you say.
Yeah, I think if it's set there as a charge, they will pay it back because otherwise they're going to default and it's not going to help them. So, yeah, and if we're looking at 15 grand over 5 years, it's £250 a month. So, yeah, still a decent sum of money to pull away. But if that unlocks their option to move, then that's got to be a good thing. Obviously, it's a choice. They can still go ahead and pay it up front. Um, but yeah, I don't think it's. A couple of people and MPs have questioned about the debtor part of it, and I think if it is a second charge, it is attached to the property. Yeah, fine. Look, people will default. There's always a risk to that because their circumstances will change, job losses or anything else for that matter. But that second charge will certainly protect long term. The taxpayer will eventually get that revenue when needed.
Is the idea with the petition not necessarily to say, this is David's way and it's, this way or the highway sort of thing and it's, annual installments, etc. Is the idea to come forward to the government and say, look, we can see there's a problem. This many people have signed the petition. Now it's over to you as the think tank and you as the government to kind of work out what works for everywhere across the board here. Here's the kind of synopsis we've looked at. And here's kind of a rough overview, but over you to kind of cross the T's and dot the I's.
Yeah, to be absolutely clear, yeah, this is one suggestion, and we've got to go forward with something. The important bit is the conversation happens. What would the only worse scenario than that is the conversation doesn't happen. And if there's a better solution, I'm not fixed. From my perspective, I think if there is a better solution available, I'd support it. What I do know is I think we can do better as an industry to support that for our consumers. So yeah, this is one of many. I've had many conversations, Chris, from various people, many names that you had come across in our industry, and had some great challenge, different solutions, and we've talked through those from scrapping it completely to paying the difference on growth. And look, all great suggestions in their merit, but the important part here is we get a conversation happening.
Yeah, sure. I love that. So what's been the resistance or the support? What obviously you've gone out of the world and you've gone, guys, I've got this idea. I think it's gonna be a positive thing to take forward. What's the split been? It's been kind of people cheering you on. It's been naysayers. What's been the answer?
Largely cheering me on, I've got to say. I'm surprised by the amount of people that have supported, got involved. That's been fantastic. There have been a few that have been, probably slightly the other side of the fence, and that's great. It's created a good debate. I think if I can't sit there and explain the benefits of what I'm thinking, then it falls apart very quickly. So I think it's good to question that out. We've had some agents, some key influencers that have been incredibly supportive on the initial part. And yeah, when we look at the names that are supporting us or supporting the petition, rather, then yeah, great. What's very clear is there are a lot of people that feel the same, that a conversation's needed, and we can have a better system.
Mm. And do you think that many agents and, well, I suppose people outside of agency as well feel that kind of have the almost what can I do? It's the government. What can I do sort of thing. But I suppose it all has to start somewhere.
Yeah, we've had a couple of those, to be fair. I'm not going to sign it because the government are just going to say no. Um, I'd definitely have that response. And look, that's fine. I can't change that one individual. All I can hope is that there are another 60 million people in the country, and we get the signatures from somewhere else. But there is absolutely that risk. We get the conversation to Parliament. They turn around and say, "Can't afford it, not priority," etc., etc. Um, but I think the hope of trying far outweighs the risk of not doing anything else.
And what's the landmarks you're going for? Because there's two big landmarks. There's 10,000 signatures and 100,000 signatures. So what happens at each of those?
Yeah, absolutely. So, to answer the first question, I mean, look, we've got to be going for 100,000, right? Otherwise, why would we be here? But that's obviously a tall order. We're approaching the 2,000 mark as we speak, Chris. So that's 2% of that. So we've got a long way to go. The the next milestone for us is that 10,000 mark. The 10,000 means the government has to respond. So that in itself would be great, but I'd be happy with that, but disappointed because I think there's enough people in the industry that understand that there's a change. I think there'll be enough consumer interest if they're aware of it that will make that happen. And it's time the industry comes together, backs it, and makes this happen.
I suppose thinking out loud here, you've got what 50,000-ish estate agents in the UK. So even if every single one of them signed up and thought, "Wow, great idea, David, I'll sign up," you're only halfway there. So I suppose the key to getting it across the line is the public and consumers jumping on board with it. 'Cause obviously, I mean, it's not a limitless number, but it's definitely more than 100,000. So I guess I suppose the challenge for you is how do you unlock it so that sort of normal people that aren't estate agents and solicitors and conveyancers care effectively.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's absolutely the challenge. Yeah, you get your initial cohort that want to support. You get people that jump on the bandwagon. Massively impressed when you go through social media. You find some agents have just gone off their own back and started to promote it. Delighted with that. I've had some agents approach me, say, "Do you mind if we put it in our news blog? Think it's a great idea," and they've gone ahead and done that. Um, a big shout out to Rightmove and Zoopla, to be fair, Chris, because they've both heavily communicated with myself around this, and they both want to support it. And again, to be clear, they might not be supporting it's the best idea since sliced bread, but they absolutely understand the conversation needs to happen. And delighted, yeah, Rightmove last night posted out onto one of their socials with 90,000 followers. You made the point around consumer eyeballs. We need to get in front of consumer eyeballs, and Zoodler are going to be doing something shortly to follow a similar path. And the next step really for us, we just created a bit of a white label package to send out to companies. Really to ask them to promote through a window display, through a blog, through a social post. And we provide the templates for that. They can use their own. They can adopt these if it makes it easier. And yeah, we're really after everyone to get behind it, to get to our consumers and really make a difference there.
Good. So I suppose the next question I should quite nicely ask is how can everyone get hold? How can they help? How can they sign the petition? Of which I'm going to answer one part of that already, which is I'm going to put the link for it below this podcast and YouTube video as well. So that's a nice, easy one for me to answer as well. How do they get behind it with regard to kind of the marketing aspect and getting out with their marketplace?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to go out to agents and offer the pack to everyone. In the short term, if they, by all means, they can drop me a message through LinkedIn, and I will pick that up. And if they send an email address, we'll send that out to them. And then, yeah, the more they can do to get that out into their consumers, their own teams, then great. A little bit of effort, and we can get there quite quickly.
Good. I'm going to ask you a bit of a curveball now, if that's okay. If I made you Chancellor tomorrow, or Housing Minister, or Prime Minister, if you get promoted to that level, what would you be changing about the housing systems? You've got stamp duty, which obviously you're very passionate about. Is there any other things you would throw under the bus at the same time?
Oh, you're after all the good ideas, Chris. Um, yeah, the process of moving home is pretty broken. To be fair, I think it's an incredibly stressful process for anyone to go through. To start that process with anywhere between 0% and 100% of the move actually happening, it's an incredible gamble. And yeah, people in some places have to move. They might have to downsize for financial reasons. They might have to upsize for family reasons, and it shouldn't be a gamble. I think it's time that that process changes, whether or not that's contracts that people tie into so they can't just walk away. There are pros and cons with that as well. But I would certainly look for a way where the process, one, is quicker, because if it's quicker, the fall through rate generally is lower, but also a way that people are generally committing at an earlier stage rather than leaving it to chance.
Yeah, it just feels a lot like a lot of the metrics you would want to go in the right direction are going in the wrong direction currently. So I, again, researched for this podcast. I thought I'd have a quick look and see how long the average person stays in their home for these days. And it's knocking on 20, 21 years in some cases, which is just absolutely crazy. Even, I don't consider myself that old at a plucky 39. And even at my age, I think to myself, God, I remember that figure being like 8 years or 9 years and 10 years. And now it's like in the 20s already sort of thing. It's just going in the wrong further direction. And same with sales progression. I remember it taking 4 months and thinking that was quite a long time. And now the average is like 6 or 7 months. Why are we going so much in the wrong direction with this?
Yeah, I put that conversation to a legal firm, who, yeah, in the conveyancing world, and largely they're almost that concerned of being sued in some areas that they want to make sure they double check everything, cross every T, dot every I, something that they might have taken a view on in the past. So I think there's a way the consumer behavior has changed, has driven the conveyancing behavior. Everyone's being asked to double check more and more. The regulation on estate agents, which I'm behind, by the way, but yeah, even in that sense, if we talk about the last 20 years, AML or material information, the Estate Agency Act, making sure people are just abiding to the simple things. There is more regulation coming. That has a impacted time. Yeah, the days of being able to put a house on the market the same afternoon that you valued it, that's a little bit tougher. So everything is taking a bit longer, but we need to improve in terms of digitalization and making sure that processes can be slicker than they are. We shouldn't be reliant on waiting on searches taking weeks or local authorities to come back in months. So there's opportunity in front of us. I think that's the greatest thing about this.
Excellent. David, thank you so much for coming today. You've been an absolutely brilliant guest. I will wish you the best of luck. I will support you as much as I possibly can do with the stamp duty direction. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. So thank you for giving me the time today. It's really valuable.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.